the universal response.
Yeah.
Has that been served?
It's, no, they're not subpoenas. They're both more information sharing. This one is very interesting because it's my old department, and this one is related to drilling by Boy Scouts. Superior is very concerned about the effect that that drilling is going to do for tourism in the area.
Is that paused? As a project?
This is dated back in January, so I don't know what the current assessment is of that. I'm sure we can find out from Bob, but it's for our list. It's for our reading pleasure.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You sent an email about the Mr. Stevens letter. We're fine.
Oh, what?
I'm not. You can if you'd like. I mean,
We're in compliance.
yeah, no, I'm not at all concerned about it. I mean, first of all, it's an LWCF site, and I get that, and it's a policy issue that the city feels. If they want to sue them, then sue them. Bring it into it. It's just background information.
We're going paperless. I
As I
feel like
said,
we got a
I
lot of
claim
paper.
no responsibility because that all happened after I retired. So I had nothing to do with it.
Not one binder, but two.
To be honest, I think
Two binders and envelopes and
So I was just gonna try to.
I had that impression. Anger is silly for.
But I figured it back.
Okay.
Anyway.
That's the way to do it.
Okay. Are we set?
Yes.
I'd like to call to order the Arizona State Parks and Trails Board meeting on April 27th, still today. I think it's still the 27th as we're going at 1 o'clock. And thank you all, especially those of us who have been sitting through these very dynamic meetings leading up to this. I'm glad we only do this once a year.
That's not for the record.
With that in mind, let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Matt, you wanna? Jeff? Jeff, man.
Getting every name
Nikki,
today.
all of you need the name tags or something.
Dale Larson,
Here.
John Sefton,
Here.
Lisa Atkins, Debbie Johnson, Orm Lewis Jr.,
Here.
Sean Orm,
Here.
Terry Palmberg.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the the mission statement. I'm sorry, I do want to repeat that. I know our previous Chair Kay would do this at each meeting, and I always thought that was a nice prelude and philosophy going into it. So, as board members, we are gathered today to be the stewards and voice of the Arizona State Parks and its mission statement to manage and conserve Arizona's natural, cultural, and recreation resources for the benefit of our people, both in parks and through our partners. Consent agenda. Let me first of all read this statement. The items on the consent agenda, item D1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are non-controversial nature, and they've been grouped together for a single vote. Without board discussion, the consent agenda is a time-saving device, which I think we can all concur would be a nice item after this morning. And board members receive documentation regarding these items prior to the open meeting. If any board member, however, would like to remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion, please let me know before we take a vote so we can do this at the particular time on the agenda. Otherwise, we will move forward with the consent agenda as it is presented. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Sean Orm, so moved.
Second, Orm Lewis.
The consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or comments? Roll call, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I would like to just point out the fact that while it is under consent, and you addressed it in the opening speech, but sitting here today, I think that the time, the attention, the debate, the discussion from all of the advisory committees is really to be commended, as well as the information that has been available to us as board members via the new web portal. The amount of time that staff was dedicated to addressing a number of my questions, that while this is taken as a consent item, I want to assure the public that we take each of the items very seriously, and they've been extremely vetted. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments? I think we all concur sitting through the sub-meetings today. It was a learning experience for many of us. I thought there were some outstanding, excellent questions that were queried, and I thought staff did an exceptional job in being able to respond to all of those. So with that, should we do a roll call vote then, or can we do it in acclamation? Roll call?
You can go to acclamation.
Or roll call, it's yours.
Well, it's just us right here, so we'll do it. All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thanks, John, for that comment. All right, regular agenda action items. Approval of minutes. The minutes coming up here in a moment. So, we're reading them in.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. The minutes from the March 21, 2019 meeting, is there a motion to approve?
I would move to approve the minutes.
Motion by Member Palmberg. Is there a second?
Sean Orm, second.
Second by Member Orm. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 2, Bow State Park updates and possible action. Mickey Rogers.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, I'm Mickey Rogers. I'm the Chief of Grants and Trails. On October 25th, 2017, Arizona State Parks and Trails Board, State Parks Board meeting approved $750,000 from the off-highway vehicle decal funding to purchase and develop a 51-acre parcel in Bouse, Arizona for proposed Bouse State Park, which would be Phase 1. And State Parks would be requesting additional funds to complete the proposed park. At the April 21st, 2018 board meeting, an additional 18 contiguous acre parcel was approved for purchase using existing approved funds. Also at the April 21st, 2018 board meeting, the board approved an additional $188,796,000 in recreational trails funding for park day use development. Prior to releasing the funds, however, the board requested that State Park staff draft a master plan and perform due diligence prior to purchasing the property. On December 13th, 2018, the board approved the executive director the authority to negotiate and purchase the property related to Bouse State Park, specifically not approving the further development of the project until an agreement is reached between state parks and state lands. Since this board meeting, Arizona State Parks, the Arizona Peace Trail, Inc., State Lands, Paz County, and Yuma County met to discuss the Bouse State Park right-of-way issue on April 18th. So what the discussion came to, that we're going to work with the counties because they're going to be holders of the easements, and they suggested that instead of doing right-of-ways, they do a special land use permit, which is a much simpler process. It doesn't require the right-of-ways going to auction. So they suggest that if we're going to do easements, it's with a special land use permit methodology. And the Peace Trail Inc. is going to work with them to move forward with assessing these trails for NEPA compliance, for cultural resources, and finding legal description of all these right-of-way. Also, State Parks did an environmental survey of the property. That report will be coming out soon. An environmental assessment of the building, a cultural survey of the additional 18 acres approved for purchase, a grading and drainage plan for the property, and also a survey of the property to get the exact acreage and legal description prior to purchase, a biological survey of the property, and another we had to do another appraisal of the property because the appraisal that we had done over a year ago was no longer valid when we want to purchase the property. So that's what we have done since the last board meeting. Because the Recreation Trails Fund was approved by the board for the development project, it requires the project to be active within any 6-month period. Arizona State Parks has recommended that the board allow state parks to purchase supplies and equipment with its approved funding to meet the minimum requirement and remain in compliance with the Recreation Trails program. Just to reiterate, we won't start any development until the master plan is done and state lands agrees to this right-of-way issue. But in order to keep this in compliance, we just buy supplies and materials and not do any development until that time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thoughts or comments from the board? Member Orm Lewis.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pardon my question premise on a lack of recollection. What is the name of the oversight board for the State Land Department? It has a very peculiar nomenclature to it.
I'm not familiar
The
with.
State Land Department has an oversight board that's appointed by the governor that on any major sale, that board has to approve of the sale before it goes to auction. And what I'm leading to is I would like as a condition precedent, just rather than referring to the department, to refer to that legal entity that has to review and approve any major decisions of the disposition of the state lands.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Lewis, we certainly can check that. But one thing I forgot to mention is the purchase has to go before the Joint Committee on Capital Review, which is tentatively scheduled for the May meeting. So the legislature has to approve this purchase also. That's hopefully it'll be on the May meeting before we can purchase the property.
Thank you.
June, excuse me.
And to Orm's comment, I know there's an oversight group, but I think still because it's financial, it still has, even with that oversight group, the state legislature still has to approve the allocation.
yeah.
Right, so, okay. Other comments about this? Nothing? In the report, it talks about a $10,000 fund. Is that the amount of money? Because the way the motion is up on the screen, it just says releasing funds, but it's a little bit different on the...
Yeah, we set an amount so the board would allow us to, if another 6 months comes up, we could still continue to purchase
So it
equipment.
still is the $10,000?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Member
Mr.
Lewis?
Chairman, thank you. Has the school board formally approved this initiative?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Lewis, so we met with the school board we have met with the school board and they're fully supportive of the project. And they want to partner with us to have some science projects at the park. So we have met with them and they have approved it and we can provide that. We will provide that letter if you'd like that. Yes.
Thank you.
Member Palmer? Oh, okay. Any other comments about Boys State Park? And thank you for keeping us up to date with
Yes.
the development of that. Obviously, Lisa's not here to give us, I assume the communications with State Land Trust is still ongoing?
Yes, it is. It certainly is.
All right, is there a motion on the action item on Boys State Park?
I move to authorize the expenditure of recreational trails program funds in the amount of $10,000, allowing state parks to purchase supplies and/or materials for future development at the proposed Bouse State Park.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
The item is moved and seconded. Any other comments or thoughts from members? Hearing none, will this require roll call because it's money?
It's same type of motion. I mean,
Okay.
it's up to the chair
All right, let's
to do
just
a
do
roll
it.
call or a voice vote.
All right, thanks, Nat. Just want to make sure I know we go through this. So, all those in support of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Pass.
So, I think,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jeff will do the roll call.
I
everybody.
think that would be better. Thank you. Let's do it. So again, there's a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. Let's have a roll call vote on the motion on Bow State Park. Jeff?
Dale Larson.
Aye.
John Sefton.
Aye.
Orm Lewis Jr.
Pass.
Sean Orm.
Aye.
Terry Palmberg.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, we have 4 votes aye and 1 against.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, before
Yes.
we leave this topic, in 2018, when this Bow site was proposed, we were actually calling it the Peace Trail State Park because of its location. And so I'm wondering if we might be able to have a bit of a future discussion on how state parks are named and what this park really should be named. Because now this is the second name I've heard. So, and I mean, we got it in writing from an original proposal that it was called Peace Trail State Park. So,
Good plan. It's going to have a very long name.
Yes.
I think that's a good idea.
I
Bring it,
just-
because you're coming back with a master plan anyway at
Right.
some point.
Yes, we certainly are. Once we purchase the property, we'll contract with somebody to do a detailed master plan and come before the board and the counties and the community before we implement any of the development.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Since there is not any item under item 3 from the consent agenda, let's go to discussion. So, board members, now, item number 1, we'll discuss current events and our recent experiences on the outdoor recreation community. So, have anything you'd like to share? Some thoughts? Member Sean?
Thank you. Yes, I do. I recently have found myself in 4 different parks, and I'd like to comment on those.
Thank you.
First of all, at Catalina, I was flabbergasted to see that they actually have sunscreen at the trailhead. Wow. It's amazing. It's in one of those little things like you get Purell, only it's sunscreen, which I think is tremendous. And it was widely being used, actually. That trip also took me to Oracle, and I have some concerns at Oracle, and they're related to something Mr. Sefton mentioned in the AORC meeting with regard to infrastructure. The Canley House that is there, for those of you that haven't been, this is the most magnificent historic home, and it's endangered at present because of a lack of funding and labor support for its maintenance. There's a lot of deferred maintenance, as there is with any kind of a historic building. This year, as we all know, there were significant rains throughout Arizona, and portions of that home are literally melting away. And I think it's incumbent upon us, when we accept ownership of these properties, that we maintain them and preserve them. This is an exquisite piece of property, and I'd like to think that we can do better on that piece of ground. Similarly, a couple of days ago, I was at Tonto Natural Bridge, and there were concerns voiced there, not only by parks staff and the rangers, but also by, I was able to overhear visitors to the park expressing their concerns because a predominance, actually, of the trails at Tonto are closed. You cannot get below the bridge. And there's this beautiful walkway and viewing platform that's there. I was told that it was inspected last October, but it still isn't open. And that visitors to the park pay their fee, they come in, they expect access to the park, and the rangers are very good about telling people, well, we're sorry, but there are certain trails that are closed. The public knows that when they hand over their fee. But then they are able to view the bridge from the top but not the bottom, and they're very dissatisfied. And they will go right back to the gift shop and request a refund. And what's particularly frustrating to the rangers there is that it's their perception that they will contact someone, I don't know who, in the central office, here where we are, seeking information about when are we going to be able to open this trail? And they're told, well, we don't know. And all they want to know is when that's going to be, so that they can accurately inform the public that's visiting. This trail will be open on such and such a day. They don't understand the holdup, nor do they understand the lack of information. So that, I would like to see, to work with them on that. Lastly, on my way to Tonto, I stopped by Rockin' River, because this board hasn't heard a thing about Rockin' River in 2 years. There is a sign on the gate that says Rockin' River is closed, and the gate is locked with 2 chains and about 4 padlocks. And I'm really curious about that. What's happening with Rockin' River? Does anybody know?
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer a lot of that, particularly with Tonto. First of all, the bridge has been gone through several inspections. We received the latest inspection, I think it was late last week actually, that it is unsafe, it is overstressed, and it's a danger. So that bridge is going to remain closed for the foreseeable future till we can come up with a plan to actually replace it. The problem is that it's within the 100-year floodplain, so now it needs to be raised. So we're starting with a brand new bridge. The fact that the staff at Tonto State Park are unaware, they must be living in a cave, because our folks have been up there. We've had inspectors up there. We had notifications on the website that the bridge has been closed for our visitors as well as our staff. So I think, based on the feedback that you're getting, we may need to circle back with staff at the park and remind them what's going on. And this is a big ticket item. This will probably run into the millions of dollars of replacing this bridge. We kind of fell into the budget process. We couldn't get this report and enough staffing and briefing to JCCR this past week, so we're going to be bringing this to them probably in June, that we can get their authorization to spend money on replacing that bridge. So certainly the visitors' frustrations are there. We get that, but we received reports the bridge is fine. We received reports that it's going to collapse at any minute, and then I think there was a third one that was kind of in between. So we were working very closely with Department of Administration and contractors and others, our development folks here. But I think the fact that staff is telling you they're unaware of what's going on baffles me, incredibly baffles me.
Well, it baffled me as well. And when I presented my Parks Pass, thank you for that, to one ranger, he was talking about just the lack of information. And so then, I did my thing in the park, and then when I left, I went in to say goodbye. There was a different ranger there, and he gave me the exact same story of no information is coming out of the central office.
Yeah.
So there's a breakdown somewhere, and I'm sure what they all said is, we want a safe park. We just want to know what's happening and what we can tell the public.
Right.
So.
Well, we'll circle back with them.
I'm sure you will. Thank you for that.
So thank you for bringing that up. Now, Rockin' River is an interesting one. It's not necessarily that we don't want the gates open, but working with all of the partners up there, Forest Service, we have local conservation groups, we have the Indian tribes, we have legislators that really want that park open, but I think as we start working through the master plan, what are we going to do? What's this park going to provide? There are concerns all over the place on us breaking the locks off and letting folks in there. And we've got to do some more diligence on that, meeting with those folks. Forest Service has, we have direct access through there to the Forest Service lands. They're concerned, a lot of it, as we are, about environmental cultural resources that are there, several Indian tribes. So we've got to circle back, I think, with them and make sure that we're all on the same page of what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, how do we come up with a plan to address those issues, local community involvement. So I think it's taking a giant step backwards and making sure that we're not leaving anybody behind as we start to go forward with Rock and River. And then, of course, with the budgeting process, we've had to make some decisions about what we're going to spend money on. There's too many projects and not enough money. And
Do you mean what we're going to spend money on at Rock and River?
right, as a development build-out project. And in light of a lot of the concerns, I don't think there's showstoppers, but I think there's major concerns that we thought going forward with a development plan and starting development would probably kick the hornet's nest with a lot of the folks up there. So I think as we backtrack and then go forward with Rock and River, I don't think these were, according to staff anyway, these were issues that we knew there were issues. We didn't realize they were this big, and particularly when you talk about water rights and use of water rights in that area. So I think saying water rights, cultural, and environmental, those are kind of big flags in my mind that we have to make sure that we're doing our diligence, I guess was what I'd say. And then we'll be back to you, keep you updated on that.
Okay. So we kind of got the cart before the horse. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I think, I don't know. I think in hindsight, yes. I think we may have gotten the cart in front of the horse, but I don't think it's gone. It's salvageable. I think we just have to step back a minute and make sure that we bring those folks along. I've got a meeting in a couple weeks with the Nature Conservancy, and we're going to sit and talk about this and other issues up there. The Forest Service, we have to bring a lot of the Indian tribes on board, and then I think after I kind of do that assessment, I'll bring it back and to see if there are any showstoppers here that we might want to come back to the board and talk to you all about where do we go from here.
So in the meantime, what happens to the funds that were appropriated?
Those funds, just based on the recent JCCR hearing, we pulled those back and committed those to other projects.
I don't, Mr. Chair, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody on the board in terms of the discussion, but
Okay.
perhaps it might be something to
We
notice
can-
for
we
a
can
future
schedule,
meeting.
right.
I mean, you could schedule a meeting very soon to
Well,
put this on the agenda.
perhaps when Michaela comes up to give a legislative update.
There you go.
That might be able to
Okay.
address it at that time. Would
Good.
that work for you? Okay,
Yeah, I
thank you.
don't,
No.
I don't want
No.
the board members to feel that you can't
It sounds like, though,
But I
that,
just want to make sure that it doesn't get
Right.
to, so that someone says, I wasn't here to hear what you guys.
and it sounds like staff wants to be able to kind of reconfigure what this is with the proposal and bring out the
Right.
the project. So, but thank you so much for updating us on that
Okay.
trip. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. That's
Any
it.
other events or current issues that the board would like to share at this particular time? Before we go to Michaela, and you'll be up next, so we can come over there. Bob, I just wanted to thank you and your staff for the incredible job today and the hours and days leading up to this in order to manage 5 open public meetings with agendas and minutes and reports and the like. I mean, this is no small undertaking at all. And to be able to sit in the audience, listening to the comments and the way that your efficient professional staff did made me very proud and honored to be a part of this group. So my contribution right now is just to thank you and all of your staff for putting this whole thing together today. It was really, really a great job, so appreciate it very much.
Yep, you bet.
All right, with that, Michaela Larkin, would you give us a state legislative update?
Thank you. In front of you, you should have Arizona State Parks legislative update kind of agenda is set to quickly and efficiently go through the information. To start out, the major objective for us since my coming on board at the end of January was the confirmation of Director Broscheid. Thanks to a lot of hard work by the director and a lot of visits to different legislators, he was confirmed in March. And doing that, and I think this kind of sets the theme for what remarks that will follow, is that what we heard from legislators was that they're looking for transparency, and they're looking for an engagement that we all have the same constituents. There's people who recreate from Maricopa County, there's people who recreate in the individual counties, and there's a great desire for there to be open communication between all parties as to kind of like our parks and how they are managed and the development of new parks. So that's kind of the background setting for it. Part B, legislation. If you turn the page, I did more of a breakout of the different bills that are related to Arizona State Parks and Trails. So I will start this by saying that the agency did not run any bills themselves this year. So there's nothing that we sponsored and said, we need this to change in statute or change in law. So we don't have anything that's sponsored directly by state parks. But there were a number of bills this year related to state parks. And so we talked about them briefly at your last meeting, but just kind of recap where things have gone since that time is that when we last spoke, we were talking about the Heritage Fund bills. So there's a concerted effort by quite a number of legislators on both sides of the aisle to reestablish the Arizona State Parks Heritage Fund. There's two bills, as you can see, the HB 2701, which is sponsored by Representative Osborne. Her bill would restore the fund and also restore funding from the lottery for the fund. That bill, the last action taken was it passed the House and it was referred to the Senate Rules Committee and has kind of been put on ice, so to speak. There's also SB 1241, sponsored by Kate Brophy-McGree, which reestablishes the fund but doesn't have that immediate lottery impact. So there's not money set in the budget for it to transfer automatically from the lottery to the new fund. But the fund would be available for donations for other legislative appropriations. The public comment made by the members of the Appropriations Committee continues to be that this is in the budget process, that as they negotiate up and down the available monies for new projects, either one-time or ongoing, that these bills were in the mix. They were very favorably received by all the committees that they came before, so that's kind of the status of that. It continues to be part of the larger budget process. In terms of the State Lake Improvement Fund, those were the bills that were directed more at a specific fund of state parks. There was SB 1443, which was Parks Board Financial Audit. When we started the session, it was audit of the whole agency. As it moved through the Senate, it became audit of the State Lake Improvement Fund from 2016 to 2019, the fiscal years. Then it crossed over to the other side, and there was the strike everything. So legislator Borelli, who had sponsored the bill, let someone use that bill for a different purpose. So the bill was amended and changed to be the transfer of sovereign land, which, as I understand it, it's the land in the riverbed at the time of statehood and rivers that were navigable. So it transfers some riverside bed, which could be the river at times and land at times, to the city there, and it's on the governor's desk. So that took away the bill that was directed towards us for audit. SB 1444, the State Lake Improvement Fund, counties, that was the bill that would return the monies collected for the State Lake Improvement Fund to the point of collection. that bill passed through the Senate, went to the House, and then someone tried to amend it with a bill that the counties found very aggressive, and that failed completely in committee. So that bill is inactive at the present time. There's a few other bills that didn't go anywhere but had been mentioned earlier that I'm just going to skip over for the sake of moving the conversation along, but they're entitled under the general. I would bring up that second section, agency-related bills, just to make some commentary that this year there were a lot of bills by the legislators of the majority party that were directed towards kind of putting their viewpoints or wishes into the administration of state agencies. So these span from the one about the citizen portal, that's still active. This would mean that every state agency would have to spend money kind of developing a portal for people who they take information from to correct the information in their agencies. So in a position that we're in where we do have people who have parks passes or different parts of information, it could lead to a cost that we would have to bear as an agency. So there's a lot of unrest against this bill, I'd say, on the part of the state agencies, but I just wanted to make you aware of it. And then the bills that follow were related as well. And so I'm happy to talk more at length of those to you personally, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move back to my legislation E, dead. And so this is where it drops into the next part I'm going to discuss, the budget process and legislative oversight. Nothing is truly dead, as a bill at the Arizona State Legislature until session ends. There are opportunities, as the politics is currently practiced, for bills and even statutory changes to be dropped into the budget legislation. So we continue to monitor, our funds, our bills, just to see what's happening. So I don't want to say everything's completely killed at all times, but just to keep you aware that there's always wrinkles that can pop up. But we will make you aware if these come to light, but we're hoping not. And so that brings me to the budget process and legislative oversight. And as I started with this, that we are neutral on the bills that are related to us. We have kind of two aspects to what kind of govern our activities, right? You guys, the board, but also as a agency under the purview of the governor, we participate often in their larger kind of in their larger directives towards what's on the table for the budget. And so these roles, the roles each different parts play, the legislature has an authority over the monies to delegate, especially the appropriated funds, and to also monitor the use of funds. So I just wanted to start my comments from that perspective. So for 2020, the legislature made no ask when they set up what do we think should be in the budget and presented in January. There wasn't any specific legislative ask for state parks in the legislature's budget. For the governor, what the governor documented and wrote down, and this was part of what I considered a larger trend, is that there's certain state funds that since the Great Recession were used towards operating budgets, and this happened all across sorts of agencies. It was the case that the governor's office went through this list of things. So in our case, the legislature annually provides an authority for monies from the off-highway vehicle fund to be used for operating expenses. The governor's position across agencies is if we've been doing something for 6 or 7 years, maybe we should put that in statute. So that was the governor's position. We, of course, expressed to them that that seemed not as simple as just making it permanent law, and it was something we'd be open to having a larger conversation on if this is something that passes. But I want to make it very specific that this wasn't like a parks thing. This was kind of we looked across all these things that we're doing, let's make it permanent thing. So it wasn't a specific us. But we have said if it is going to be a specific us, our interest would be having more conversations on if that was a good idea for the governor to pursue. So just want to make that clear to everyone. And the second thing that was in there was related to public safety. So the governor had an overall platform of raises for public safety people. We have a very small number of people with that designation where they're in the public safety retirement system. So if that moves forward in the budget process, we would expect to see an adjustment to our operating budget to account for raises that we would have to provide for those people who have that designation within our system. That brings me to the status of the budget negotiations. So we're at the point where bills can't, the committee action is done, minus a few exceptions that can happen with the Appropriations Committee and rules to pass the budget legislation. But right now, the governor's office and the majority party are negotiating what should be in the budget. So we hope it will end soon, but it has been a challenging year, and people, as you read kind of the paper and stuff, say like, well, will it end next week? Will it end in June? That's kind of debatable and whatnot. So the next thing I was going to address is the Joint Committee on Capital Review. And so this is why I brought up the part of the legislative authority is to say, like, you're appropriated these funds, how are you using them? And this goes back to the question that Sean had. So part of the governor's request for this year was to extend the lapse date of the appropriations for those larger projects, like Rock and River. So when the legislature authorized those monies to begin with, they were given one lapse date. The governor's office in the course of the negotiations has said, we have these major projects, we want to move forward with them, we want to extend the date by which you can use that money. So in terms of the Rock and River money, there has been some money expended for the planning over time. But right now, our hope and desire is that the governor's office and the legislature will agree to extend that money going into the future. And that would be a similar case for other projects, if that answers your question. So what Bob was addressing was the Joint Committee on Capital Review. And we're in an unusual position as an agency. We don't have a dedicated source of building renewal funding. We don't have a dedicated source of building renewal that automatically goes into a fund year after year, and everyone just doesn't even talk about it at the legislature because it's part of the budget process and over time. We're in a very unique, unusual position. We're not paying rent to the Department of Administration, so they're not taking care of our capital needs. We have monies that the legislature every year, or when they so have chosen to, goes through and they say, well, we're going to designate X amount from the State Parks Revenue Fund for use for capital projects, right? So where we're coming from is that because it wasn't a regular thing, we had lots of different years of appropriations that had different sets of rules is the essential part. So when we came before the Joint Committee on Capital Review this past week on Wednesday, it was a reporting of kind of where we're at with the status of our building projects. Are we moving along? Are we getting things done that we said we were going to get done? And some of it was the technical rules to make sure that we could use certain monies immediately within kind of the scope of what was done. And so it's, of course, I could talk for like 2 hours on the subject. So it's a conversation I'm happy to have coffee and walk you through and talk you through. But the essence of it was that there's technical rules associated with the use of the money that the committee has. So last year when the FY19 budget was passed, a plan was presented on how to spend money for those building renewal projects. We made some small adjustments of prioritization within that list because of the project needs, and that was one of the asks we had. The third ask was to say that the legislature has yet to authorize the use of the State Parks Revenue Fund for Oracle. We went before them to ask and say, developing Oracle is still a priority. We're asking you to give us a chance to engage in some more master plan development on that project. So we were asking for access to use some of the money previously appropriated to be used for the planning and to gauge kind of what the needs are of the entire state in terms of development. And so I would just say that in terms of the Joint Committee on Capital Review, I wanted to point out they have a purpose, and it's generated out of a desire to kind of oversee the use of state funds, and in our case, they'd be the funds that are passed through from our users and whatnot. And so they've asked us to continue to come back and to update them on the status of the projects, and we're very happy to do that because I think that falls into kind of like this larger issue of community relations. So I'm our legislative liaison. I'm also our tribal liaison. And so the one thing that we continually heard out talking to the legislators was that they love the state parks and they desired to be involved and they desired for transparency. So our actions have been taken in the steps towards making sure that we're connecting with people. And so I would ask your help as you go home or as you think about things, and I put my contact information. If you'd like to give me a call, if there's a particular person in your community you'd like us to talk to, if there's a particular group. So where Bob and I are right now is we're going to go see the County Supervisors Association in the next month. We've been going to some of the groups where major tribal communities meet and discuss things. And we're looking towards setting up meetings where the legislators can visit our state parks and learn about the great diversity that we have and what we offer. Because I think you guys know it from being on the board, we have some of the greatest cultural and historical resources of our state, and we have some of the most, beautiful hiking areas, and we're doing a lot of great things in a lot of different areas, and we want to make sure that people know the story. So we're looking for your input in terms of building community relations with people, because our greatest strength will be in having, especially if a recession was to hit, is in having people in all parts of the state who say maintaining the state parks, using that money to develop the infrastructure and or new parks is very important to them. So I would end with that, and then just one other aside. I've worked towards a weekly update. If there's a particular dynamic you'd like to see for the future, especially next year, like something on our website that you could just download if you were somewhere or direct someone to, or if you'd like the format to be in a certain way or you have concerns, please let me know. I've talked to some of you individually, and we're also very interested if there's anything related to statute or the development of policy that you want to be involved in, to contact either Bob, myself, or the deputy directors. So sorry it took so long, but that was the
No, not at all. Thank
the
you.
essence. So
Very comprehensive. Thank you. Michaela, comments, board members? That's a lot. That is a lot. John?
It was certainly a lot, and thank you, Michaela. I think in the effort of transparency, and I was just kind of looking up who's on that list of the JCCR and recognize a few names, and per my echoing what I said at the AORC meeting, that the importance of the deferred infrastructure improvements. I do think that, in hearing what Sean witnessed at Oracle, that there is a need for some emergency dollars, things along that line, that it is our responsibility. We're accountable to protecting first and foremost, and sometimes it takes too long to master plan. And if buildings are falling apart or literally melting, we need to listen to the staff that are out there. When I hear sewer lines have failed year over year and things along that line, what are we doing to support you as a team, and working with the legislators so that they have clarity? It is one of the most confusing things in understanding the routing of the public money, but I think the governor's office, and you echoed it today, that the importance of transparency. Part of transparency is not just so much showing it, but it's simplifying it, right? So how simple can we be in demonstrating the needs in parks? We can be pretty straightforward and really detailed in that area. The project by project, because as we make those rounds throughout the state, I too, over the holiday break, got to visit southern Arizona and got to meet a lot of the staff, and we're blessed to have such a team of professionals that know what's going on. They might not know everything that's going on at that moment or have all of the details, but they care about what they're working on, and through our communication, through the methods of management, that we can be better. Then what can we do as volunteers on this board to support you as an agency and to better be clear on where the dollars and the resources are, and hopefully cut through some of the red tape that is not necessarily a transparent process. We're here to help.
Thank you, John. Other comments? Michaela, very, very thorough report, and I think what you've been doing with the weekly update has been very informative, and I would hope that you would continue doing that as you go through. I hope it doesn't last until June for this budget session that I'm sure you're horrified to think about. Just a quick footnote, if the Heritage Alliance or the Heritage Fund does get approved, certainly the historic preservation part of that could be allocated to things like the house that you're referring to, Sean, and other areas, because historic preservation was a big part of that previous fund when it was done. So in terms of individual opportunities to talk to our state legislators when it comes to the budget, sounds like it's going to become a budget issue more than anything else at the end. Certainly want to get the law on the books, no doubt. But we certainly would also like to see some funds for it for emergency purposes as well. So again, thank you very much, Michaela. Really appreciate it. Good job. All right. Boyce Thompson, Arboretum State Park. Brandy.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I gave the update last month about the process of the MOU that we're working on with Boyce Thompson Arboretum. The process is still happening. Nancy has reviewed the MOU and given back comments, and we are going to meet, the director and I are going to meet in early May with some of the board members of Boyce and go over the points that are outstanding and remaining. And then we'll just go from there. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any other questions.
Well, I can imagine at least one person has some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Orm Lewis. Having sat on that board for more than 12 years, I have a considerable insight as well as a financial supporter. So I certainly would appreciate the opportunity to discuss where I'm coming from vis-a-vis the direction that is otherwise being pursued, without criticism, but I think I might be able to bring some ideas to the table that would achieve a much more responsible solution to the personnel dynamic, etc.
Thank you very much.
If you could give me a telephone call or something so we can meet and talk, I'd appreciate it very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Yeah, this has been lingering for some time, and I know there's a lot of moving parts. So this MOU and working through it, I think, would be something that we all obviously will want to see what the final recommendation is. I know it's been certainly in all respect to Orm and his history with BTA, so it's a good thing. But any other thoughts, comments? None? Thank you very much, Brandy.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
And this is kind of came up very specially for us that we're going to get an update on ADA and the transition plan with Arizona State Parks. We've got a wonderful team coming up here to give us an update on something that's near and dear to all of our hearts. So take it away, Sean.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, my name is Sean Hammond. I'm the ADA coordinator for State Parks. Oh, sorry. Move over a little bit. I'm joined by Dominic Corden. He is my new ADA intern, so just started in February.
Thank you, Dominic.
Dominic goes by Dom, so Dom. Yep. And then Hannah Miller is an intern with the development program, but she's also helping us with some of our ADA projects as well.
Thank you, Hannah.
So,
nice to meet you.
You know, it's a very exciting period for the ADA program right now. You know, between having support from, support staff, and then also, having the support of leadership, from our director to Darla, our deputy directors, Darla, Brandy, and of course, Mickey. We are finally making progress on improving accessibility at our parks and in our programs. I'd like to show you all a video here. Okay.
Hi, I'm Paul. I work here at Boyce Thompson Arboretum. We're here with Ability 360, and Arizona State Parks. We're enjoying a day in the gardens and trails and checking out trail accessibility. Well, we have about 300 acres and about 2 miles of paths and trails. There's a lot to see. The Arboretum is not just a collection of cacti, it's a collection of desert plants from all around the world. So any continent that has a desert ecosystem, we have plants representing that ecosystem. So right now, you're kind of in the heart of Australia. So one of the things that's kind of fun about a visit to the Arboretum is in the space of a 2 and 3 hour walk, you can walk through areas that are evocative of Australia, of Central and South America, of Africa, the Far East. Really a lot to see here.
I really didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be a bunch of cactus, to be honest with you. Always spent a lot of time in nature before I became paralyzed. Once I was hit with this, it felt like all my doors closed at one point in time in my life, and so it left me very detached. And I had no idea that there were places such as this that gave us the opportunity, with the limitations we are faced with, to still be able to get out and do these kinds of things. I just had no clue, really. It's incredible because I literally just shut the door on all of that. And mainly because you don't really think they exist. It's just kind of hidden in the background until somebody discovers it and shows you. You have no idea what you're missing. It's absolutely magnificent out there.
You know, Ability 360 is one of our most important partners, and they had a day out at the park, and you know, when people ask, you know, well, what is the goal of the program? I mean, what he just said is exactly what we want. You know, this is an individual that stopped going to parks. He stopped going out into nature. He just didn't think really these services, these parks with accessible trails existed anymore. So. You know, it's about getting out and well, one, it's about, making our parks accessible as much as we can, and then reaching out to those folks that have just simply stopped, going out and shutting that door. So regardless of a person's ability, their obstacles, their income, we want every park in our system to offer this type of experience. Now, before we go into some updates, I'd like to go over some of the challenges and compliance issues that we are dealing with. So, the last time parks conducted an ADA assessment and transition plan was 1994. Yeah, quite a long time. So, and even though one was created, when you go through this and you're familiar with our parks, you'll realize that some of the recommendations in here were never seen through. So I'm looking at Amallavi right now. This young lady right here going through doors at Amallavi, this was a photo from about a year and a half ago. She's one of our volunteers. She was able to get through the doors, but it wasn't easy. Those are very heavy doors at Amallavi. So, and recommendation number 2 from 1994, install automatic door openers for both sets of doors at the entrance and exit to the visitor center. So, some of these issues that we must correct. And of course, 1994, we've added new parks, and we've never really had a full-time ADA person to follow up on this. So there's been a lot of development. A lot of programs that have been developed that didn't have an ADA person to make sure these things were done correctly. In fact, until recently, development projects here at parks did not involve an ADA review. So we have since changed that. That's part of our process. So whether it's a new development project or a maintenance project, we now have that ADA piece in there. So. Now, lastly, another really important thing that we have to address is volunteer and staff training in the field. So I did a survey about a year and a half ago. 40, 50 people participated, and it showed that 70% of our staff and our staff and park managers had never had ADA training, and this isn't just for here at Parks. In their work lives, they have never had any ADA training. So, these are the folks that are seeing our visitors day to day. So that's something we really have to, address. All right, so, let's see. Go ahead, you can go to the next one.
Hi.
Next one, yeah. All right, so updates, transition plan, for us to have any impact, and to see things through, a couple things that we need. One is, we partnered with the disabilities community. That was really the first thing that I did. I needed their guidance, their expertise. Again, groups like Ability 360, everyone that we've worked with has just been amazing and really, helpful. We get emails and phone calls, and when we see people in the community, there's really an excitement about what we're doing here at Parks with accessibility. I mean, people are really looking towards us to be that leader, and providing, accessible, outdoor recreation opportunities. So we have a lot of people looking up to us. Now, of course, the other piece was the staff, right? So, and again, we just started working on these projects in February, and there's been a lot of activities that have taken place. Let's start with the family campout program first. First of all, the family campout program, it's one of our best programs. So if you haven't participated in a family campout, please do so. So, I mean, it's just amazing. The part I love is to see, the kids that participate, they're hooked. Cell phones are gone within an hour or two. It just really has a positive impact on youth. So please go out and see a family campout. Now, when the program was developed 6 years ago, the accessibility piece was not integrated into the program. So that was really the first thing that I went to Dom and also to Hannah, was to help us. In the schedule, for the spring schedule, Lost Dutchman was the first park to hold a family camp out back in March, and so that was the one that we focused on to make sure that that was accessible. These two just did such an awesome job, with that event, and wanted to have them say a couple things about the experience and some of the things that we did to make it accessible for folks.
So again, like Sean had said, this was basically my first undertaking, was going out with Hannah and Sean and also Louie, the director of Family Campout, and we surveyed the property to see what accessibility needs there were, what possibilities were even there for us. And Amy, the park manager there, the ranger, she's been such a key element in making it accessible and doing just overall in the whole park. And as we were going around and looking at things and saying, well, these are some changes we could potentially make, she was right on it. Yeah, let's do it, let's get going. And so we were able to come up with not only the facility sort of changes, like curb cutouts and things like that to make it accessible for wheelchairs and such, but also program elements, like taking people on the hikes. We actually partnered with Civitan, a local independent living center, and brought some of their folks out to participate in the family campout at Dutchman. And we had one gentleman who had cerebral palsy who was also nonverbal, did not have any sort of communication device or anything like that. And so we had to try to figure out what maybe paths there were that he could go on a hike, what, archery was one of the programs, how do we make that accessible? And so we were able to really come together and put a really nice program together there as a test bed. And it showed Louie that the potential was there to then now do it with all of the different parks, all of the different campouts that he has scheduled throughout the year. And everybody, we had 8 participants for that first one. Most were on the autism spectrum, and then we also had the one gentleman that had cerebral palsy. And everyone had just an absolute blast. Civitan themselves want to work with us more on future events, possibly bringing their people to like Carson Caverns, things like that. So we really got a good feel to continue on and do more, like I said, with the other parks.
I do want to say real quick, this guy's arms are really big for a reason, right? He does a lot of biking on trails, and on trails that most people can't do. The young man that had cerebral palsy was in a wheelchair. Dom was riding his bike, and the young man in the wheelchair was provided assistance to go over, some of the obstacles along the trail. But he was such a positive influence on this young man. He felt like, hey, I'm out here too. So, yeah.
Very good.
As mentioned, we had one participant at the family campout that was nonverbal. So I created a picture schedule, which you can see in this handout. A picture schedule is a very useful tool for someone who is nonverbal. We had the one participant that was nonverbal, and he was so happy to be able to communicate with the staff members and could understand activities that were taking place throughout the day because he did have this schedule in front of him.
Yeah.
Did you find scorpions on number 14?
Did we end up finding them?
We did not actually.
Good.
Luckily.
I'm not sure.
It'll happen, though. It was great. Civitan has their own family campout program up in Williams, mostly summer camp. And they had never used a schedule like this for those, for the participants who are nonverbal. So they were so excited to take our idea. Yeah. All right, so, another program, Sign Language Saturdays. So excited about this, right? Now, at Kartchner, right, what's the great thing about Kartchner? Yes, the beauty of the cave is so amazing, right? It's part of that great experience. But it's the stories, that are told about Gary and Randy. For me, being a ranger there, it was the science that we could bring alive in the cave. It's so important that people get both of these experiences. So we worked with a couple disability agencies. They recommended that we start off with one day a month. So second Saturday of every month now at Kartchner, select time is set aside, and we have a sign language interpreter who is on the tours. So yeah, just terribly exciting to have this program in place. All right, let's get to the transition plan because I know we're running out a little bit of time. All right, so as mentioned, 25 years since the last ADA assessment and transition plan. Within the coming week, we will have everything in place for the bid process to go out. The scope of the work will include standard things that'll happen in ADA assessment, right? Facilities, parking lots, boating piers, all that will be included. Additionally, we are asking that the company provide training on how to collect the data. We want them to get like the maintenance staff at the parks involved in this process because it's the maintenance staff that are ultimately going to be making these adjustments over time. So we just think that it would be a great opportunity for them to participate and learn from the company that's going to be collecting the data. Another scope item that will include is professional ADA training as well. So we'll be asking the company to provide that to each park that they go to for not just the park staff, but the volunteers. We've been told that it may take anywhere between 12 to 18 months for this project to be completed. So, any questions on the transition plan itself?
No questions, but just for a point of information, Sean, obviously you know it. When the American with Disabilities Act was approved 1989, 1990, put into federal law, that all the federal agencies, including the Department of Interior, required any governmental entity to have to do an 80-day assessment and transition plan or fear not receiving monies from the federal government. So we were all under the gun to do that in the early 1990s. The sad point of your commentary is that strength of the empowerment to make things happen has pretty much kind of just fallen by the wayside in terms of the federal insistence and authorization, other than through the complaint process. So if there is a complaint, a user, for example, wants to come to a state park and they can't get in, or whatever it might be, they file a complaint. That, unfortunately, is the way things are remedied these days. So the fact that you are now updating your plan, you're not alone. My guess is most park and recreation agencies around this state and others are similarly going to have to do that. But the main thing is that the ADA now is a complaint-driven operation. And what you're doing is to try to get a step ahead of that on that thing. So kudos to with your plan. And the other thing is, and selfishly, ASU has certainly the academic ability with its students to help provide you with support through its therapeutic recreation program on those plans to be able to make it so that, plans are expensive, consultants are expensive, on and on. So anything we can do to help for you to do this park by park by park, as well as the nearby municipalities that are by your state parks. They also have resources available that they can bring out to help you do that as well. So obviously you're doing the right thing, but it's through no fault other than the fact that now it's a complaint-driven process.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So under our next program, and it's passed out, where do I got it here? Here we go, right in front of me. Everyone have a chance to look at the terrain hopper?
Yeah, it's cool.
So on Monday, I'm going to send out a doodle poll to everybody, to all the committees and the Parks Board. And we're going to select a couple dates, and we're going to be having the company that makes this particular device. They're here in Phoenix, small business. They build these machines here in the Valley. They're going to bring out 6 of them to Lost Dutchman. We'll do it early because it's starting to get warm, but I really encourage all of you to come out and try riding one, or not try, they're simple to ride, is to come out and experience this, because this is an incredible device. This is a device that takes people who would not have access to nature, normally, and it gives them that freedom. And so what we're doing is we're putting together a program in which we will purchase, these items, and we're going to start out at one park, and work out all the kinks, and then perhaps, hopefully expand it. So we do have a little bit of help. We have 2 states that have already done this. One of them is Michigan, and the other one is Colorado. So, Bob, you want to say anything about the Colorado piece?
I would. It was basically the Friends of Staunton State Park that received, it's a long story of an individual donated the land for that park, and then an individual that basically lost mobility after he swerved to avoid a deer and rolled his car, and he was basically paralyzed, I think, from the neck down. Big avid outdoorsman. Well, long story short, there was the Friends group of the state park actually collected the donations to buy the first track chair. And whether that's a good fit for Colorado or Arizona, but there's mud there, there's snow there. But go fast forward to today, there were 3 track chairs that were purchased. The reservations for those track chairs is done through the online reservation system. They figured, I think when I left, they figured that 275 people who have never been able to do this, what Sean was talking about, have now experienced going out on the trail. And I was lucky enough to see the first one. It makes sense, and everything you said, Chairman, is right on. But when you see somebody for the first time, or for the second time, to be able to go back out and at some point think they never have the ability to do this again, the look on their face is priceless. And so, Sean and Dom and his group had come in, and I said, well, whatever we've got to do, let's get it rolling. If it's the Friends groups or some other sort of donation.
Foundations.
A foundation, exactly, that full steam ahead, because this is a really, really cool deal. And they've taken it by the horns, and it'll be interesting to see how they go.
What's the cost of each unit?
Devices are $25,000.
That's what I thought,
And there are a few other manufacturers out there. This particular company has a donor that wants to donate, provide half the funds for one.
Good.
Yeah, just, I'll send that email out. Please come out. You'll just be amazed at how it's quiet. It barely breaks any tread. It's really, really an incredible machine.
It really is.
We just got one with our therapeutic recreation program. That's why it's very current on it. And that was what the cost was for us, and it was donated as well. So that's great. That's great.
Sean, what was the date? Is the date picked, or it's?
No, I'm going to, in the doodle poll, I'll select a couple dates for folks, and we'll pick a date. Yeah. Are we looking at a weekend? Folks think it's a weekend, or should it be a work weekday? Does it matter?
Doodle us.
Doodle it.
Doodle it.
Doodle.
Yeah, okay.
Calendars are crazy.
That's right.
One last thing I just wanted to bring up is, one of the projects that's approved today is for Oracle State Park, for trail system there. One of the trails that will be developed there is going to be an ADA trail.
Right.
But what's so exciting about this is, one of Hannah's projects is she's working on developing a sensory and braille trail. So whether you are blind, you're deaf, you're in a wheelchair, this is going to be a trail for you. And it's surprising how easy it is to actually to make a trail like this. So, because Tucson's right there, large population of folks with disabilities, it's a great place to start out with one of these, because this is not something we've ever done before.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job. Excellent update. All right, call to the public. I didn't receive any cards, so I'm guessing that part isn't there. The upcoming meeting schedule is on the agenda for our information. May 23rd is the designated next business meeting, assuming there's enough business to meet on. And I'm sure that Lauren and Bob and company will be getting out information on that. One thing that came out from earlier this morning, especially from ASCOT, was the opportunity maybe to combine their summer event out at, I think they mentioned Mormon Trail Lodge as a possibility, but perhaps that might be an opportunity for us as a board to then meet also when you have ASCOT out there, try to double it up, and then we can do an event as well. So Bob, when you send out the communications on that, it'd be great for us. I know Orm and Sean and all of us really want to get out and find out to the northern climates, especially if we do this in July or August. I think that'd be a great opportunity for us to do that. Nothing else, so with that meeting, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
It's cool. It's work that they're doing. It's what I told them.
See, this is one of our students.
Is that right?
Yeah, she's one of our students.
Just the minimum.
She is,
standard.
gosh, I
Like
can't think of her
Rams,
name now. I
accessibility.
should know it.
What we're
Not
doing
Brandy.
is giving those folks the
Anyway,
same
she was at
opportunity.
With Ability 360, and now she's gone out to Boston. She was in a car accident on the night of her high school graduation.
No, I didn't feel in any way bad.
Anyway, she's an athlete, and it's great